Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint?
Legalized marijuana is always a very difficult question.
The time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
From now on, I smoke weed exclusively with white people.
Well, I'm getting higher next time.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man, the Snoopy Poop Dog.
There's definitely cannabis in there, and it makes sure that I can sleep now.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Don't piss off your old dealer.
Marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized.
I know you're not supposed to admit that you smoke pot, but I don't drink alcohol.
Let's get out of here. I have some really good weed back at the hotel.
I used to smoke marijuana.
I don't care if an adult wants to smoke marijuana. They shouldn't go to prison for it either.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio, and that Chiron at the top is wrong. Let me switch over to the other view. It's not always easy, folks. I do my best, but not always easy. A lot of stuff going on here. Made a lot of changes, and I'm still trying to get them all figured out. But thanks for bearing with me. It's changed up my whole routine, folks. My timing is off. I got to get all these graphics taken care of. But thanks for staying with us. Big thanks to Diane Goldstein from Law Enforcement Action Partnership and that extended interview on their new mission, which I'm really excited about because to me, we need an organization of cops that we can support, right? The more stories that keep coming out about these racist police departments, these, the riot cops that are pepper spraying people and so forth, shooting unarmed black people, it's a bigger issue than just the war on drugs. The war on drugs is a big part of it. The war on drugs is oftentimes the pretext that leads to these terrible things happening. But it's bigger than just that. And so to have LEAP change from being just against prohibition to being an action partnership to being in support of reform of policing at all levels is a very good sign. I'm very excited about this as we move forward. Now, coming up in this hour, too, we'll take your calls here at 650-LEGAL-MJ. Also coming up on the show for the rest of this hour, we're going to be digging deep into the audio archives of our new Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, or as I prefer to call him, Jeff Beau 3. That's right, Jeff Beau 3. Good, congratulations, Jeff Beau. But we got a lot of audio from the past 3 years, audio from 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017. So I guess 4 years worth of audio that I dug up all this morning on Jeff Beau III, Jeff Beau 3, and what he thinks about marijuana and its legalization. I'm afraid it's not going to be very good for our side, folks. Oh, yeah. The gunslinger's coming to town, and he don't like the marijuanas very much. We're going to have to get used to dealing with the same kind of reefer madness, over-the-top rhetoric about marijuana that we thought we had extinguished. We thought had died an ignominious death with the end of the George W. Bush administration. But no, folks, it's coming. And I tell you, I may be the doom and gloomer here in the room. Me and John Hudak and a few others. I don't think we're going to be seeing massive raids. I don't think we're going to see a massive amount of DEA raids, just again, because of the logistics of it. There's just, and I would like to think that maybe they learned their lesson over there at DOJ, that when they were raiding the medical marijuana people in California, in Montana, in Washington, it generated a whole bunch of bad publicity. And maybe they have learned that going in with the stormtroopers, with the jackbooted thugs and kicking over the display stands and breaking the glass and seizing the plants and all that makes for bad public relations. And instead, they'll focus their efforts on bureaucratic measures that aren't very sexy as far as the news goes, but could be devastating as far as the industry goes. Filing an injunction doesn't really lend itself to good camera visuals. Not something you're going to see leading the evening news, but it could be a nightmare for the legal marijuana industry to receive one of these injunctions. I really think that's the directions that Jeff Bow 3 is going to go. I think it's going to be all about as much paperwork, obstructions, injunctions, court orders, as many of those as possible. I believe Hudek's right. I think there'll be a letter sent out to the states that just passed laws for 2016 telling them, hold your horses. I think there'll be letters going out to the existing states saying there's going to be a renewed emphasis on the Cole Memorandum, and here's how we're going to test it, and here's the data we want to see from your states. And if we don't get that data from your states, we'll just assume that our data is correct, and we will take corrective actions. I think that is very, very possible in the next couple of years. Hell, the next couple of weeks. We'll know within a couple of weeks how bad this could get. So I'm going to play the audio for you. When we come back, we'll play the audio from Jeff Bow 3. Y'all can make up your own mind if this sounds like a guy who's not going to revive the war on drugs.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
This noise woke me up. It was my older brother, Rick, looking for money. He was high on crack. He was gonna kill me. I'm never gonna be like him. Can't nobody make me do drugs.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
People addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin.
Okay, well, maybe you're high, too.
According to the U.S. Atomic Clock.
And blue blasting Gergen, Pfaffen der Blasten, Schnurb Norben. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Almost 9 after the hour. We're talking about our new Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, Jeff Bow 3, and his stand on marijuana. What does he think about the legalization of marijuana? What does he think about drug policy in general? And what does he think about drug war policies in general? We're going to get into 4 years worth of audio that I've dug up from the archives of C-SPAN and YouTube to discuss that measure. But before we do, I want to address a point I saw in the chat room while I was on break there. And it was this point that the marijuana reform is too big for any one person. It's bigger than any one person. It's too big. It's too popular. It's just got too much momentum. Or I'm paraphrasing. Got too much momentum for it to be stopped. I want that to be true. Oh, God, I want that to be true. I want to think that we're making so much money and so many people like weed and there's so many TV shows about it and the culture has changed and everybody thinks it's cool. I want to believe that that's all we need. That's gonna save the day for us. We're gonna be fine. The problem is, I know a whole bunch of marijuana reformers in their 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And hell, Keith Stropp and I sat up one night till 1 a.m. smoking joints and drinking wine and talking about this very subject. And that is, don't assume that this can't be overturned. Don't assume that we're so popular, that we're so got so much momentum that this can't end real quick with just a couple of scandals and a moral outrage. The lesson is right there in history. In 1969, the Gallup poll showed 12% support for the legalization of marijuana. By 1976-77, that had risen to about 36% support. The support for legalization had tripled. Now, the support for decriminalization was far greater than legalization. Decrim being just, a fine, no arrest for an ounce or less. Decrim was how the marijuana reform movement started. It started right here in Oregon in 1973. And from 1973 to 1978, 11 states passed decriminalization measures. And these weren't initiatives. These weren't, people getting petitions and putting it on the ballot. These were legislators that were passing decriminalization. That's how popular it was at the time. 11 states in 5 years, a tripling of support for legalization, which underlying support for decrim must have gone through the roof. And the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, campaigned as Governor Carter in 75. He was telling people that we ought to have end federal criminal penalties for the possession of 1 ounce of marijuana. By 1977, he's standing in front of Congress asking them to pass a law to decriminalize marijuana. There was never, before now, there was never more momentum for marijuana reform than there was in 1978. A tripling of the polls, 1/5 of the United States reforming the laws, and the president cheerleading for it. And all it took to take that down was one story about a cocaine party in Washington, D.C., involving the president's drug advisor. And then a parents' movement shocked at the notion that half of the high school seniors were smoking pot and doing so with gas mask bongs. And from 1978 to 1980, 2-year span, all momentum on marijuana reform was frozen and reversed. I shouldn't say it was reversed because none of the states took away their decrim laws, but it was frozen. Let's leave it at that. In 2 years, it only took 2 years to absolutely freeze the momentum for marijuana reform. It only took 2 years for the Gallup polls to go from 36% back down below 30%. And then by the mid-80s, get down into the 20% range, like 24%. That's the kind of effect a continued rhetorical assault. And again, Reagan wasn't raiding anybody, any more than normal, right? But they weren't sending troops into Oregon or anything agents into Oregon to make us enforce our criminalization or to not decrim, right? This was just the rhetoric of just say no. Just the federal government making a concerted effort to put out a public message of just say no. That's how powerful and how quick this stuff can change. Now, I'll grant anyone that wants to make the point that you're right, the late 70s are nothing like now. Things are a lot different. Our polls are at 60%. There's been 20 years of medical marijuana. There's 28 states that have legalized medical. There's 8 legal states. It's not entirely analogous. I'll grant that. My point is, though, don't take for granted where we're at and that it's just going to keep going that way, because we've been pretty lucky for the past 8 years and not faced any substantial opposition to what we're doing. That's what Barack Obama did. That's the greatest marijuana legacy of Barack Obama, is he did nothing. He stood back and let it happen. It could have been opposed. And now I think it will be. At the very least, we're going to see a change in rhetoric. We're going to see a change in tone with respect to marijuana, because Jeff Sessions is in charge. Jeff Beau III. And I know people are like, well, he's in his confirmation hearing. He sounds like he mellowed out a lot. Well, yeah, he's trying to get a job. A lot of people will mellow out on their real feelings when they're applying for a job. I believe the guy who in 2014, 2015, 2016 sat on the Senate Judiciary Committee had all sorts of things to say about marijuana. I believe that guy. As far as what Sessions believes in his heart, what he thinks about marijuana, what he thinks about the gateway theory, what he thinks about drugs in general and addiction, how he'll act on them, we shall see. But what he thinks about them, I've got no doubt that he is an old school drug warrior to the core. And given any leeway to prosecute the drug war, old school style, he will. Let me give you my evidence. My first bit of evidence is the fact that President Obama had an interview with the New Yorker. This was back in 2014, where he talked about marijuana, and he was asked about his marijuana use. And this is Jeff Sessions. This is in a... Now, the clips you're going to hear for this whole hour, they're all mixed up, but they're from 2014 confirmation hearing of Loretta Lynch, 2015, or of Eric Holder, hearing with Eric Holder, 2015 confirmation hearings of Loretta Lynch, 3 different Senate Judiciary hearings, and his 2017 confirmation hearing. So I've picked these up from multiple sources. I'm not going to try to identify which went to which, because all we're trying to do here is ascertain, what does Jeff Sessions think about marijuana? What does he feel about marijuana? So this was the quote from Obama as reported by Sessions. If the carts will work. The cart's not going to work? This is what I have to face? All right. We are going to reboot that then. That's what we'll do. We will just reboot the damn thing and go from there. How's that sound? Sound good, everybody? All right. Automation's always fun, isn't it? So let's, anyway, the quote from Obama was the fact that he didn't think that, he had smoked marijuana as a kid and he found it to be a bad habit, not that different from the cigarettes that he smokes, not that different from, and not that more harmful than alcohol. Truth, honesty, what marijuana, some real facts about marijuana. And Jeff Sessions wasn't too hip on that particular note.
Did the president conduct any medical or scientific survey before he waltzed into the New Yorker and opined contrary to the position of attorney generals and presidents universally prior to that? That marijuana is not, as I've quoted him. Did he study any of this data before he made that statement?
So, yeah, he was shocked that President Obama would say it was a bad habit like cigarettes and no more harmful than alcohol, questioning whether or not he had any science behind that. And of course, we know the science behind that. But if in Jeff Sessions' mind, that was ludicrous. That was crazy to say something like that.
Smoking cigarettes. Oh, I wish I had. That's the kind of message people hear.
Sessions is really concerned about that message. You can't have the leadership of the country saying that marijuana is okay.
You got to have leadership from Washington. You can't have the president of the United States of America talking about marijuana like it's no different than taking a drink. I used marijuana when I was in high school. It's no different than smoking. It is different.
He thinks it's different, and he thinks that the Attorney General has a moral duty to speak out against it. This is what he had to say to Eric Holder about that.
I just think it's a huge issue. I hope that you will talk with the president, you're close to him, and begin to push back or pull back from this position that I think is going to be adverse to the health of America.
And he had the same thing to say to Loretta Lynch.
And I hope that you will cease to be silent. Because if the law enforcement officers don't do this, I don't know who will. And in the past, attorneys generals and other government officials have spoken out, and I think kept bad decisions from being made.
So, as Attorney General, do you expect that he'll hold himself to that own standard?
All we want to do is pump you up.
So I think at the very least, we're going to get more of that just say no, war on drugs type of rhetoric out of Jeff Sessions. When we come back from break, I'll bring you Jeff Sessions' comments on marijuana and what it does to people and how he believes absolutely that it's a gateway drug, plus his love for Nancy Reagan and just say no.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
You're listening to The Russ Belville Show.
We have 4 times the incarceration rate on a percentage basis of any country in the world. In second place is New Zealand.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere.
This is Radical Russ Belville with a word about stone driving. Numerous studies have shown that once you factor in age and gender, drivers with cannabis in their system have no statistically greater risk of motor vehicle crashes than sober drivers. But that doesn't mean you ought to be toking and driving. Those studies are referring to people with any amount of THC or metabolite in their system, not people who've just smoked marijuana. Simulators and observed demonstrations show that cannabis consumers do develop a tolerance to the impairing effects of marijuana and can perform driving tasks within an acceptable margin of safety. However, infrequent and novice consumers do not and cannot, and would be wise to never toke and drive. Even regular cannabis consumers should exercise caution before deciding to drive, as most state laws punish drivers harshly if they're discovered to have marijuana in their system. This has been a public service announcement from The Russ Belville Show.
Remember, friends, there's more to life than marijuana. I just can't remember what it is. Why'd I come in here? You're tuned into The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Some house cleaning here before we get back into the Jeff Sessions stuff. Kira out in the chat room says, I'm telling you, older conservative brains are hardwired to hate weed with a passion there's no getting through. It's true. It's a hardwired thing. It goes back to Vietnam. It goes back to hippies. It goes back to commies. The damn commies. But for the housekeeping, who was it? Sam Funk in the chat room is asking, will the second hour, Toker Talk Radio, be available via podcast for us VIPs or all? The last couple uploaded have only been the first hour. Yes. The answer is yes. Right now, the uploads are still going through Cannabis Radio, and so you're only getting the first hour, because only the first hour is going to be on Cannabis Radio for free. Second hour will be podcast for our VIPs. Now, here's the problem. I don't have the VIP thing set up yet. I still need to make a little bit more money so I can upload my past catalog to the new platform and to be able to pay the $75 a month that the new platform costs. When I get that new platform up, then yes, all of the Toker Talk radios will be available for VIPs, including the ones that were for this week, right? So you can go back to the archives if you want. The other way to put this is, for the time being, no. For the time being, you're just going to get hour one as a podcast, because I don't want to give away another hour for free anymore. I need to start making money at this. I'm damn near 50, people. I have no insurance. I have no health care. I have no car. I have no retirement. I have no possessions. Okay, so I was checking out the YouTube page the other day, and on one of the, because I've put the monetization on YouTube, right, where it plays a little 30-second ad before you watch the show archive, right? And there was a comment there from someone that said, I'm not going to sit through some ad. Like, I do this 6 hours a day to bring you a free show. You can't sit through a 30-second ad? Come on, man. Get me paid. I want to keep doing this. Get me paid. All right. Enough complaints. Let's go back to Jeff Sessions. Back to Jeff Sessions and his comments. What does Jeff Sessions think about the danger of marijuana in America?
But the United States attorney that works for the President of the United States does not know whether he opposes or favors legalization of marijuana. He certainly has said some things that indicate he thinks it's a very little problem. But these data show that it is.
And the data he's referring to?
I was very disappointed in a Wall Street Journal article, May 20th, in which you seem to make light of marijuana use by those who like to work for the FBI.
That's Sessions interviewing James Comey, the FBI director. Now, what had happened is Comey, the FBI had come out with these new standards that were going to relax the FBI's ban on hiring people to do cybersecurity work, hackers, right? They were going to hold off on this or lighten up on this ban on hackers who'd had previous marijuana use in their history, because they still wanted to be able to hire some hackers. It's like, yeah, it gets kind of difficult trying to hire people in creative and in intellectual fields when you don't let them smoke pot. The internet exists because of pot, people. It is rare that you will find any information technology job that drug tests, that doesn't have something to do with something else like hospitals or the army or anything like that. But because the IT world knows that we don't, hell, man, go do, Steve Jobs did LSD, for God's sake, invented the whole Apple platform, right? So no, in the IT world, we don't care so much. So he asks Comey about this. Comey kind of says, well, I was just trying to point out that it's kind of tough to get hackers when you ban anyone who ever smoked pot. And this is what Sessions had to say about that.
What I want to just say to you and to those who might be listening is it's far more important than just the details of whether federal prosecutors start prosecuting marijuana cases in Colorado. Colorado was one of the leading states that started the movement to suggest that marijuana is not dangerous.
State of Colorado. Yeah. So he's blaming Colorado, says, it's leading this movement to say that marijuana is not dangerous. So in his mind, marijuana is dangerous, right? It's not that we've discovered it's medical. It's not that it's never killed anybody. As far as Jeff Sessions is concerned, marijuana is dangerous, and Colorado's leading a movement to fool people, to lead them astray. And it's the job of the federal government, big Uncle Sam, to make sure we get everybody back on the straight and narrow. Here's some of the things Jeff Sessions believes about marijuana. 4.3 million people abuse or are dependent on marijuana. You know what they're referring to? People who regularly smoke marijuana. Daily tokers. I would fall under that 4.3 million because I smoke marijuana every day, multiple times a day. He also seems to think that this is not your father's Woodstock weed.
Several times. 60s, and it does impact people.
Yeah, not your father's Woodstock weed. Yeah, because Cheech and Chong, those guys were just smoking swag, right? Yeah, sure. What else does Sessions believe about marijuana? He believes that, well, at least the American Medical Association thinks it's awful.
We need a nationwide understanding about the problem. This is very real. Are you aware that the American Medical Association just last year issued a report that hammered this idea that marijuana is not dangerous?
Yes, the AMA says that marijuana is dangerous.
About this study from the American Medical Association, October of 2013. Heavy cannabis use in adolescence causes persistent impairments in neurocognitive performance and IQ, and use is associated with increased rates of anxiety, mood, and psychotic thought disorders, close quote.
Not just that, it can make you go schizo.
Or this report from Northwestern University in last December. The study found that marijuana users have abnormal brain structure and poor memory, and that chronic marijuana use may lead to brain changes resembling schizophrenia.
Brain changes resembling schizophrenia. Yes, it's all coming out. Oh, and don't forget, we also, it's very serious about, the most serious thing about marijuana.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
This is as obvious as night following day. The American Medical Association just last October said heavy cannabis use in adolescents causes persistent impairments, neurocognitive performance, and IQ, and use is associated with increased rates of anxiety, mood, and psychotic thought disorders. That's the AMA.
American Medical Association is unequivocal of the danger.
Lives will be impacted, families will be broken up, children will be damaged because of the difficulties their parents have, and people may be psychologically impacted the rest of their lives with marijuana.
And see, that's what we have to worry about, according to Jeff Sessions, is it's just obvious to him. To him, he says it's as obvious as night following day that marijuana is going to cause problems. The American Medical Association says it's terribly, terribly dangerous. And no matter what you think, you listener, with your silly little science and stupid little studies, no matter what you think, marijuana is the gateway drug.
This is as obvious as night following day. You make more marijuana, more available. You basically say it's not very dangerous. You're going to have more problems. Wouldn't you agree?
You're going to make it more available. It's going to be more dangerous, and it's not going to be good.
And we're going to see more marijuana use, and it's not going to be good. We're going to see more other drug use, illegal drug use also, which is damaging.
There's the gateway theory. We're going to see more marijuana use. That means we're going to see more drug use.
These are the kind of things that we're going to see throughout the country, and you'll see cocaine and heroin increase more than it would have, I think, had we not talked about it.
And if you're supporting marijuana legalization and you don't support him cracking down on state legal marijuana, why, you just want to see people die of overdoses, don't you?
You had a Drug Enforcement Administration recently that 100 dying of drugs.
120 people a day. And if that doesn't break your heart, well, it breaks his heart.
I can't tell you how concerning it is for me emotionally and personally to see the possibility that we would reverse the progress that we've made and let it slip away from us.
And all because we get lax on marijuana. We say that marijuana is no big deal. The next thing you know, people are turning to cocaine and meth and heroin, and it's destroying people.
Lives will be impacted. Families will be broken up. Children will be damaged because of the difficulties their parents have, and people may be psychologically impacted the rest of their lives with marijuana. And if they go on to more serious drugs, which tends to happen, you can deny it if you want to, but it tends to happen, there'll be even greater causes.
Yeah, I know. The 1999 Institute of Medicine report said there's no causal relationship between the use of marijuana and the subsequent use of harder drugs, but that's just stupid science. Sessions has alternative facts.
And it's false that marijuana use doesn't lead people to more drug use.
It's false. It's alternative facts, he says. And of course, when you really scratch the surface, if you really get down to what's bugging these guys about marijuana legalization, it's not the marijuana itself, it's that return to cultural liberalism.
What if this is the beginning of another surge in drug use like we saw in the 60s and 70s that led to massive problems in our community?
He's got a big problem with returning to the summer of love.
Tragic, like mistakes we made in the 60s and 70s.
So there you go. Jeff Sessions believes marijuana is a terribly dangerous drug because the AMA says so. And if we are lax about our rejection of marijuana, if we say it's no big deal, well, then it's going to be a gateway drug that leads people to cocaine and heroin. It's going to contribute to 120 overdose deaths a day. And my God, what do you want to see happen? A return to the 60s and 70s? Maybe if we can get some of that music. We got to take a break. When we come back, we continue looking deep into the mind of Jeff Sessions, his reverence for Nancy Reagan and Just Say No. What does he think about mandatory minimum sentencing or asset forfeiture? Or for that matter, what's he going to do about the Cole memo? The answers when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The International Cannabis Business Conference comes to San Francisco, California on February 16th and 17th, 2017. The ICBC San Francisco, Northern California's first business-to-business event since the recent historic election, will bring together top state regulators and industry leaders to discuss permits, business models, and opportunities within the newly enacted laws and landscape. Of course, the ICBC also famously offers some of the best cannabis industry networking, leveraging our worldwide following to connect wholesalers, brands, distributors, investors, and strategic partners. And don't forget to come early for our VIP reception and stay late for our legendary after party. Join us for the longest continuously running cannabis business conference in California at the Hilton San Francisco, Union Square. The one and only International Cannabis Business Conference. Visit internationalcbc.com for tickets today.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Okay, maybe you're high, too. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Where'd you learn that, Cheech? Drug school.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Warning, hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. 38 after the hour. We are looking deep into the mind of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, our latest Attorney General, a fellow I like to call Jeff Beau 3. Jeff Beau 3, all of the same great taste as Jeff Beau 2, half the calories. I don't know. Anyway, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, as we've learned, thinks that President Obama made a huge mistake by not talking tough against marijuana use, that he never should have said that smoking marijuana was a bad habit like cigarettes, and he never, ever should have said that it was no worse than alcohol. We've learned that he thinks marijuana is a terribly dangerous drug because the American Medical Association says it is, and that lives will be impacted and children will be impacted, and the devastation wrought across the land, because if we're lax on marijuana, if we're light about being anti-drug, well, more people will smoke marijuana, and the next thing you know, they're doing coke, they're doing heroin, we get 120 overdose deaths a day, the gateway drug, yada, yada, yada. So what should we do about it? We now know that Jeff Sessions hates marijuana, hates the people that smoke marijuana, hates the lax liberal 60s and 70s attitudes about marijuana. What's he going to do about it? After all, he is in the administration of Donald J. Trump, and Trump's whole campaign promise was to make America great again. So when was America great? Well, any Republicans out there, they know when America was great was when Ronald Reagan was president. When Reagan was president, America was great. At least that's what it seems Jeff Sessions seems to think when asked about the 1980s. When he talks about the 1980s and talks about how the policies then, the drug policies of the drug war 1980s, were so successful.
I was United States Attorney when President Reagan was elected in the early 80s. Half the high school seniors in America had used an illegal drug. That over 12, 15 years went to less than half that.
12 to 15 years throughout the 1980s, they reduced what he calls illegal drug use. He said half the kids had used illegal drugs, and we reduced that by half. Keep in mind, though, to get the figure of saying that half the kids had used, quote, illegal drugs, end quote, you have to include marijuana in that. You take marijuana out of that, you're down to below 10% of all the other drugs combined. This is that little rhetorical slip that they do, this little spin, lumping in marijuana with all the other drugs. So when you say things about drugs and the drug problem and drug addiction and drug war and drug crime, you can get some big numbers. You leave marijuana out of that, the numbers are too small. But as far as he's concerned, it was the Just Say No 1980s that are the answer.
Drug use had dropped dramatically since Nancy Reagan started the Just Say No program, and drug use began to steadily reduce. It's now beginning to steadily increase.
Now, it's unfair, of course, to make this comparison. It wasn't the Just Say No 80s that necessarily reduced drug use. It reduced the reporting of drug use. When the federal government's coming out and saying that marijuana use is criminal and marijuana use is evil and marijuana use contributes to terrorism, the chances that someone are going to answer a question on a poll being conducted by the federal government as to their personal use of marijuana might be fraught with a few deceptions. There may be just a couple people that don't want to admit that. So when they say those numbers went down, I'm not so sure they did. I think the reporting of it went down. Nevertheless, when they're talking about that as well, they're also talking about drug use coming down from the highest levels it ever was, okay? Drug use by the end of the 1970s got to the highest recorded rates we've ever seen. They declined by 1992 through the 12 years of the Reagan-Bush administration. Marijuana use went back up from 92 through 99 through the Clinton administration and through the beginning of the medical marijuana era. But since then, it's leveled off. What I think we've found is kind of the natural equilibrium of marijuana use in America. After medicalization, and now we're to a point where about 40% of the people have admitted to using it. About 11% are using regularly, about 8% are using daily or weekly, I should say. But they're more likely to want to report it because the cultural aspect of it isn't so harmful to them anymore. And the legal aspect of it isn't so harmful to them anymore. And the rates we have for marijuana use and drug use now are better than some of the rates that we had in the 80s that he's talking about as being so good. But he still thinks, and again, we're talking about Jeff Bowe III, our Attorney General, what's in his mind as far as proper drug policy, what's going to work on reducing marijuana use.
That's 15 or more years, but it dropped by half steadily. What a tremendous victory.
And he doesn't think it's just the drugs that reduce when you say just say no, when you have this just say no attitude. He thinks the just say no attitude actually affects other crimes as well.
Murder rate in America dropped by over 4%. That's 19. Ronald Reagan said, just say no. Started a war.
See how that slipped in there? War on crime, drugs and crime. They're the same thing in his mind. Drugs facilitate crime. Drugs create crime to Jeff Sessions. He wants to take us back to the Just Say No era, I'm telling you.
It was a great accomplishment. We moved this country from 50% of high school seniors using a drug, marijuana or other drug, to less than half that.
He sees that as a huge success. It's the kind of success he would like to replicate. And he believes that the mere rhetoric of the federal government, the way we talk about marijuana, is going to have an effect.
Nancy Reagan, the early 1980s, formed the Just Say No program, and they worked and crafted policies that would create a climate of hostility for the use of dangerous drugs.
That's what we're headed to, folks. A climate of hostility. That's what we're going to experience. A climate of hostility toward the use of drugs. He thinks that what we've been doing lately throughout the Obama administration has been precisely the opposite.
What I've been worried about for some time and have warned about it is that if you don't maintain that but start going in the other direction, you can expect drug use to increase. It's just that simple. And it is happening.
It's been obvious. It reverses 20 years almost of hostility to drugs. It begun really when Nancy Reagan started the Just Say No program.
So there you go. That's where he wants to take us. Now, can he take us there? That's another question. But for those people out there that think that Jeff Sessions, if given the opportunity, won't do everything he can to make our lives miserable, then you're not paying attention to what the man has been saying for 30 years. Can he accomplish it? Is it possible? That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, is that the direction he's going to want to take us? Is that the push we're going to get for the federal government? You bet your ass it is. And it's not just on the issue of marijuana per se, or legalization or medical marijuana. It also has to do with broader criminal justice reforms. One of the things that's been great about the Obama administration has been its look at mass incarceration. And one of the big problems that leads to mass incarceration is, of course, our policy of mandatory minimum sentencing. Mandatory minimum sentencing that began in the Just Say No 1980s, and Joe Biden had a lot to do with it too. But this mandatory minimum sentencing that the Holder Department of Justice tried to alleviate somewhat. And the way they did this is he directed prosecutors where if they were dealing with certain drug crimes to not list the weight of the drugs the people had been busted for, because without the weight listed, it wouldn't trigger the weight-based mandatory minimums for that particular crime. This made Sessions just fuming mad.
Attorney General Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, ordered federal prosecutors not to charge certain drug offenders with offenses that carry mandatory minimum penalties that are in law.
He was just stunned that the top law enforcement official would direct other law enforcement officials to not enforce laws. So you can see, if that's his attitude when it comes to the Cole memo, don't enforce the law because they've got state legal marijuana, he's going to have a problem with that as well. He thinks that not enforcing the mandatory minimums is going to lead to more devastation.
The 6-month average of drug prosecutions was down 21% compared to 5 years ago. And what are we seeing? A surge in crime, and particularly drugs.
The other aspect of our criminal justice reforms that the Holder and Lynch Departments of Justice have worked on is civil asset forfeiture. A lot of these federal asset, this equitable sharing program, where the cops, the feds divvy up the money from that they seize from criminals before they've even been convicted of a crime. Sessions thinks it's a bad idea to get rid of that as well.
On December 21st, 2015, the Department of Justice chose to stop all equitable sharing payments to state and local and tribal partners under the asset forfeiture program. The federal government has a good system for forfeiting the money. And then when the forfeiture is over, it's divided among the agencies. And as a result, state and local people are willing to commit law officers to participate in these local task forces because they're helping clean up drugs in their community, helping identify and prosecute nationally significant drug dealers, and they get some compensation back from it when they find a trunk full of money.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's mostly incorrect. Yeah, this equitable sharing program, a lot of it, what it has to do is when cops pull someone over that has, a few $1,000s in cash on them, maybe they've withdrawn some cash to go buy a car or start a business. Cops pull them over and take the money and claim they smell pot or come up with some other excuse. Meanwhile, they've taken the money, and the guy driving through the state is, he lives somewhere else, and so it's not worth his time to have to come back to the middle of the country and fight for $6,000 here or $12,000 here. And it's especially more difficult to fight for that when they have your money that you would use to hire the attorney. So everything he just said there about civil asset forfeiture was complete bullshit, but you probably figured that out already. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, the final thoughts from Jeff Bow 3 on the Cole memo when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Okay, well, maybe you're high, too.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
Yarr, thar be pirates here. Har, 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 har. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. We've been digging deep all day into the mind of Jeff Sessions to find out what he thinks about marijuana, what he thinks about the war on drugs. And it's not good, folks. Now, how much power he'll have to enact his agenda is another question. How far they can go in the world now that 60% of the people want marijuana legalized, that's another question. I'm just telling you, don't expect anything good out of this guy. Don't expect any good. Now, the best I think we can hope for out of the Trump administration and Jeff Sessions' Department of Justice is to hold what we've got. Like Diane Goldstein said earlier on the show, I think we're playing defense now, and I think hold the line. Keep what we have. That means we might not get the development of the recreational markets in California, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine. Or the medical that hasn't yet developed in North Dakota or Florida or Arkansas. We may get one of those letters, a cease and desist from the Department of Justice telling these states, don't move forward on your programs. Jeffrey Zinsmeister from Project SAM had suggested that the Sessions issue a letter to the governors in all the states with medical and recreation, just basically to every governor, because you'd have to include the CBDs too, but issue a letter to all the governors saying any sort of licensing or regulation of marijuana commerce is going to get you sued. That's the kind of thing he could do. But there was a lot of question about this during his confirmation hearings, and some people tried to take some silver linings out of his confirmation hearings of him saying, well, the Cole memo's got some good stuff to it, right? They try to make some hay out of that. Folks, I don't believe a damn thing he said in his confirmation hearings. Here's a guy that was too racist to be confirmed in 1986, but we're confirming him 30 years later. Anyway, he was asked about the Colt memo. This first clip from Sessions is him discussing the Colt memo under Lynch and under Holder.
The Department of Justice under Lynch and Holder set forth some policies that they thought were appropriate to define what cases should be prosecuted.
Right. So this is where we get into that difference of the Cole memo. Is it a list of reasons not to bust states, or is it a list of reasons to bust states? The way it's been so far is Lynch and Holder seem to use it as a reason not to go after the states. So long as you don't do this, we'll leave you alone. The problem that Sessions sees in that is that we set up all these priorities, but then didn't set up any audit on those priorities to see if they're being followed.
The criticism I think that was legitimate is that they may not have been followed.
So that's where I see Sessions seeing the Cole memo as a checklist of, if I can check off any one of these boxes, I can go after state legal marijuana. And it's not going to be hard to check off those boxes. One final point on Jeff Sessions. And this goes all the way back to the 90s. Back in the 90s, he was the Attorney General of Alabama. And there was a bill that was proposed, and he was championing this bill. He was a big fan of this bill. A bill that would have mandated the death penalty for any drug trafficker second offense. And it included marijuana. Basically, you got caught trafficking weed the second time, automatic death penalty. Now, what is trafficking weed in this case to earn this supposed automatic death penalty? The conditions were you had to make minimum wage and you had to have 5 people working with you. Now, minimum wage in Alabama at the time was $4.25 an hour. So if you were a weed dealer, let's say a weed grower, and you had 5 people dealing weed for you, and in doing all that weed dealing, you made more than $5.25 an hour, $4.25 an hour. Under that bill, you would have been executed for your second offense. Now, Patrick Leahy, one of the senators from Vermont, asked him about this.
You've been some very strong views. You even mandated the death penalty for anyone convicted of a second drug trafficking offense, including marijuana, even though mandatory death penalties are, of course, unconstitutional.
Well, I'm not sure under what circumstances I said that, but I don't think that sounds like something I would normally say. We're glad to look at it.
Would you say that's not your view today?
It is not my view today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, gee, I don't remember supporting death penalty for drug traffickers. Oh, gee. And the final question, would you not bust medical marijuana patients?
Would you use our federal resources to investigate and prosecute sick people who are using marijuana in accordance with their state laws, even though it might violate federal law?
Well, I won't commit to never enforcing federal law.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 Studios in beautiful Eagle Potland, Oregon, thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow live on RadicalRuss.com and CannabisRadio.com. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
They will smoke weed and sell pot at state fairs.
All right, maybe you're high, too. Good for you.